Has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have admitted that it happened. The Soviet version is this. One of the atomic reactors at the Chernobyl atomic power plant near the city of Kiev was damaged, and there is speculation...
At 1:23 AM, April 26, 1986, Chernobyl Reactor 4 tears itself apart. A blast of steam, concrete, and nuclear fuel punches into the night sky. Firefighters rush in, unaware they're stepping into a nightmare. But while the world focuses on the flames above ground, something far more dangerous is happening below. Inside the reactor building, the explosion has shuttered pipes, ruptured cooling systems, and blown apart the structure. For hours, water begins pouring into the basement. Every corridor under the destroyed reactor starts filling up like a maze of dark, radioactive reservoirs, and this wasn't supposed to happen. What used to be a complex of tunnels, valves, and maintenance rooms is now a flooded chamber sitting directly beneath 100 tons of molten nuclear fuel that's melting through floors, dripping downwards, spreading uncontrollably. Chernobyl isn't just burning from above, it's drowning from below. And the deeper the water gets, the worse the situation becomes. But while the basement fills quietly, somewhere above it, a different kind of pressure is building around a table where a handful of men are trying to decide what to do next. On one side of the long table sits Valery Legasov, a scientist from Moscow with dark circles under his eyes and a voice that sounds like it hasn't rested in days. He's staring at rough sketches of the reactor building, with lines and boxes showing where the water is pulled, where the molten fuel could be, and where the pipes run beneath it all. He knows the physics better than almost anyone in the room, but tonight the numbers don't feel comforting. They feel useless. Across from him is Boris Shabina, the government man in charge of the entire response. He doesn't care about equations, he only cares about the outcomes.
Will there be another explosion or not?
Reports coming from the plant. Water is in the corridors, the basement under Reactor 4 is partially flooded, no one knows exactly how much, and no one knows exactly where the molten core has gone. Around the table, the options are simple on paper, but terrifying in reality. Keep pumping water into the destroyed reactor to cool off what's left of the core, and risk making the flooding worse. Shut off the cooling and leave things as they are, hoping the core doesn't heat up again. Or go down there into the radioactive basement and open the valves by hand to drain the water away. Silence hangs in the room. Everyone knows what that third option really means. If the radiation doesn't get them, the collapsing structure might. If the valves won't budge, they could drown or be buried alive. If they fail, the disaster continues unchecked. But if they succeed, no one can say for sure how much danger they've actually erased. Down the hall, in a quieter corner of the plant, 3 other men are about to learn exactly what that third option requires. Alexei Ananenko sits with the 2 others, Valery Bespalov and Boris Baranov. They're not politicians or famous scientists, they're engineers, men who know where the pipes run, where the valves sit, and would know exactly how the water moves through the corridors under Reactor 4. Oleski knows the pipe and valve layout better than anyone else on the site. While others stare at rough maps, he can trace the route to the drain valves from memory. So when they say,
"We need someone who can find these in the dark and in flooded corridors,"
everyone quietly knows it has to be him. He doesn't give a speech or ask for time to think, he just understands that if he doesn't go, someone who knows less will. Valery is the calm, reliable senior engineer, the kind of person people trust in a crisis. He listens to the plan, understands the risk immediately, and doesn't need it exaggerated to know it might be a one-way trip. He could stay back and let another worker take his place, but that's exactly what he doesn't want. Someone inexperienced stumbling around a destroyed reactor. And so he chooses to stand next to Alexei, not because he feels fearless, but because he feels responsible. Boris is the older shift supervisor, the one who's spent years watching over whole teams and entire reactor units. He knows that whatever happens that night, history will judge the decisions made by men like him, not the workers following orders. So just sending 2 younger engineers into the basement alone doesn't sit right with him, even if it would be safer to stay outside. And because of that, he decides he'll be the third man, the one holding the light, checking the dosimeter, making sure they don't face the dark under Reactor 4 without him. Someone briefs the 3 of them of the situation they're currently in. There is water under the destroyed core, there are drainage valves in the basement that can be opened manually, and maps show roughly where they are, but only a few people know the layout by heart, and Alexei is one of them. For a moment, the room shrinks, with each man calculating his own private situations, family, fear, and survival. Baranov knows what it means to give an order like this. If he says yes, he might be sending himself and his people to their deaths. If he says no, and the worst happens, he'll carry that decision for the rest of his life. Bespalov looks at the floor. He's exhausted and scared, but he also knows the ins and outs of this plant like it's his own home. He's walked these corridors 1,000 times in daylight, but now he's being asked to walk them once more in complete darkness. No one is shouting, no one is making any speeches. There's just a slow, heavy tension between the three of them. While the men upstairs argue over models and probabilities, these three men downstairs are about to live with the consequences. Finally, a simple question is asked.
Who knows the route to the valves?
Alexei raises his hand. In that moment, the decision is made not by a vote, but by a man who realizes that if he doesn't step forward, someone else who knows less might have to. The flood is still getting worse and the options are running out. And so, while the maps are rolled up and the arguments continue, three men begin to get ready for a walk that could potentially be their last. In a small room near Unit 3, Alexei Ananenko, Valery Bespalov, and Boris Baranov clip on their dosimeters and check their flashlights. There's no special equipment and no dramatic diving gear, just protective suits, gloves, simple masks, and the knowledge that once they step through the next doorway, no one can help them. A rough map of the lower level is pinned to the wall behind them. Faded lines showing the transport corridor, the stairwell, the pipe, and finally, the valves. Alexei has already memorized it and barely needs to look since he's walked that route in his head 100 times before. Valery checks his own lamp and then checks Alexei's. He doesn't say much, but his movements are careful and controlled. This is how he keeps the fear in check, by focusing on small, practical things. Boris, older than the other two, holds the radiation meter. He switches ranges and watches the needle flicker. It isn't safe, but it isn't instantly fatal either. But if they wait any longer, there's no telling how much worse it could get. They step into the transport corridor that connects them to the ruined Unit 4. Almost immediately, the atmosphere changes. The air is warmer here and carries the smell of wet concrete, steam, and something burnt that fills the air. Their footsteps echo along the narrow tunnel, aware that somewhere above them, the remains of Reactor 4 are still smouldering. At the entrance to Unit 4, Boris lifts the meter again. The needle jumps so fast that he has to switch scale. Radiation doesn't roar or glow. It's just an invisible clock ticking faster and faster in the background. And all three of them know that every second spent here will stay in their bodies for the rest of their lives. They pass under twisted beams and hanging cables. In one section, the flashlight catches a dark mass seeping down from a damaged platform above. Melted fuel, graphite, and concrete fuse together, the remains of the core. But they can't stop here. The corridor spills them into a stairwell leading down. Each step downwards feels like they're moving deeper into the disaster's shadow, with the sound slowly growing muffled from above. The only thing they hear now is their own breathing, the creak of the rubber, and the distant echo of dripping water. At the bottom of the stairs, they see the water they'll have to dive through to complete their deathly mission. It fills the lower corridor in uneven pools, reflecting their lights back at them. It's not exactly deep, but it's still enough to reach up to their knees, hiding whatever lies beneath the surface. Boris tests it first, stepping in slowly, the cold biting through his suit, hugging his legs. He glances at the meter and the reading climbs, then steadies. It's definitely dangerous, but not instantly deadly. They slowly move forward one step at a time. They don't know what's under the water. Loose cables, jagged metal, broken concrete. One twisted piece in the wrong place could trip them, or even tear a boot or glove which could become fatal. Then their lights catch something ahead. A large pipe runs along the floor, disappearing into the darkness of the corridor, exactly where it was supposed to be. For the first time since they left, Alexei feels a spark of relief. They climb up onto it, using it as a narrow bridge. This pipe now becomes their guide, some steel beneath their feet, leading them straight towards the valves. Every second feels like an eternity. Every corner feels like it might be the wrong one. But the pipe keeps going, and so they stay with it. Then finally, the flashlights find something. Thick metal valves bolted onto heavy pipes, with faded labels written above them. They've finally made it. Alexei grips the first wheel and pulls. For a moment it resists and his heart sinks. Then slowly it begins to move. Metal grinding against metal. Bespalov takes the second valve and forces it around, straining not just from fatigue but also stress. And for a few seconds, nothing actually happens. Just the sound of grating metal and their own breathing. Then they finally hear it. Somewhere beyond the wall, behind the pipes and chambers they cannot see, a deep low rumble begins. The sound of water finding a new path. The flooded pools under Reactor 4 are finally starting to drain. There's no cheering and no shouting, just three men standing in a dark, radioactive corridor, listening to the water move and knowing they've done the one thing no one else here could. But the mission isn't over yet. The valves are open, but the invisible clock is still ticking, and now they have to make it back. For a second, none of them move. The valves are open and the water is rushing out of the flooded corridors. The thing they were sent to do is finally done. But the mission isn't just to open the valves. It's to open the valves and also get out alive. Alexei lets go of the wheel and takes one last look at the labels on the pipes, burning the image into his memory, just in case anyone asks later what valves they opened. He wants to be able to say it was done and that he saw it with his own eyes. They turn and start retracing their steps, with quite a bit more confidence than before now that they're halfway done with their mission. The pipe beneath them is still their guide, walking along it like a narrow bridge with the water splashing below them as they move. The corridor feels shorter on the way back, but the air feels a lot heavier. They know they've already been exposed to radiation, but every extra second is just making it even worse. At the bottom of the stairwell, they step off the pipe and wade through the water one last time. The cold still bites at their legs, but now there's something else in it too. A faint sense of relief, as if the worst part is behind them. They begin to climb the stairs again with the melted mass still above them, fused into ugly shapes under the broken reactor. And for a moment, as they pass beneath it again, the weight of the disaster feels like it's pressing down from the ceiling. But no one says anything. They reach the transport corridor and start the final walk back to Unit 3. The readings on the dosimeter are still higher than anyone would consider safe, but the needle is lower than it was near the core, and that alone feels like fresh air. Then, finally, they see it. A brighter patch of light ahead, with the outline of other people, and finally, they step through. The change is immediate. The air is cooler, less thick with dust and steam. The plant is still in chaos, but compared to the basement, this part of the building feels almost normal. A few workers look up as the three men come back with their wet, tired and pale faces.
Did you find them?
Alexei just nods, too overwhelmed to give any more of an answer. Baronov hands over the dosimeter to a technician, who squints at the numbers and whistles under his breath. It's high, too high for a normal shift, but it's not the instant death sentence the legends would later turn it into. In some accounts, they're embraced and offered a few quiet words. They don't get medals or any sort of speeches. They just get checked, questioned briefly, and then folded back into the blur of emergency work. Sometime later, with the drama over but the danger still real, another man returns with a different job. His name is Igor Kazachkov, a shift supervisor. He's not going there to be a hero, he's going there to measure. He walks the same corridor, now mostly drained, and checks the depth indicators along the walls. Every mark tells the same story. The water that once filled the system is gone, that the bubbler pools have been successfully emptied. He reports back up the chain. The threat of a sudden massive steam release from that water is gone, and for the commission is one more problem crossed off a long and terrifying list. And for the three men who went in, it's just another entry on their exposure sheet. Alexei spent time in the hospital with what he calls a nuclear tan, resting under observation. He's damaged, but not destroyed. Valerie goes back to work, and Boris carries on as a supervisor for years. The focus of the government commission quickly shifts to the next crisis. What to fill, what to seal, what to cool, and what to bury in concrete. New diagrams, new plans, and new arguments. The mission under Reactor 4 becomes just a paragraph in a report. A small, almost invisible moment inside a disaster too big for anyone to fully understand. But decades later, when the world starts to look back and pick through the chaos of Chernobyl piece by piece, people return to this night, and to the question of what really happened to the Chernobyl divers.